Hi friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today I'm showcasing three tarot decks that you probably never thought you'd see on my feed. And bear in mind that although I prefer the Italian and French and Swiss non-scenic pip decks, the historic decks, that doesn't mean that I don't have probably at least 100 or 200 decks of different schools. And these three decks are among the decks that I have that I don't typically show because I don't typically relate to them. And the reason I'm showing these three decks is because I was prompted by the recent video chat where when I was a guest on Justin Michael's channel a few Sundays ago, and we were sharing what our favorite 10 decks were. And I had mentioned in passing that although it wasn't on my list of favorite 10, that I was really attracted to the artwork on the tarot, El Gran Tarot Esoterico by Fournier. And the artist, oh gosh, I apologize. I forget the name of the artist, a Spaniard. Here it is. There's the name. But I expressed that I thought this was a beautiful deck. And I think Justin replied with something like, well, my saying that prompted him to show one of his 10 favorite decks that he had, and he just showed it, because I mentioned this deck, and it was this deck, the Eudes Picard tarot deck. Now, I've had this deck, it says 2020, but I kind of remember having it longer ago than last year, so I don't know if it was released maybe in 2019, and it just says 2020 because it just seems like I've had it forever. But at any rate, if you're interested in it, it can be gotten at this website. And the El Gran Tarot Esoterico, this is the second copy that I believe I had. I lost the first one, I guess, years ago. But this one I just got over at Amazon. And this deck I also threw into the video today because I think they share some similarities in the pips. And this is the Manly Hall, or the Knapp Hall tarot deck, which I think they did a revision in 2020 or something like that. And so I scored that deck. You see how thick this deck is? Okay, so I believe where El Gran Esoterico and the Picard deck are similar, share similarities, is when we get to the pips. Because if we look at the trump cards, with the exception of seeing, an image that we can identify, we could probably readily identify this as the Fool card. They don't share any other real similarity. Now, in the Picard deck, as far as I know, and I have to review it again because I haven't looked at it for a while, I don't believe there are any Hebrew letters that are assigned to each of the cards, but there are planetary and astrological symbols. With the Gran Tarot Esoterico, there are Hebrew letters assigned to the cards, and there are also additional numbers besides, the normal letters, like normal numbers. Like here we have 1. But on some of the cards, we just have these, unusual numbers. I'm not really sure. I don't know what those additional numbers reference. I don't know what that's a reference to, unfortunately. And if somebody can enlighten me, I'd appreciate it. This kind of reminds me of the Oswald Wirth, which is why I pulled the Oswald Wirth out, just, to look at it. Obviously, the difference here is in the animal, and the Wirth is doing something different. Now, I noticed some of the occultists do assign numbers to the Fool card, and here in the Picard, it's 0. And in this, and then the Gran Esoterico, it's assigned the 21st Hebrew letter of the alphabet, which would make me believe that it would fall in sequence after 20, between 20 and 22, which is exactly what happened. Because when I, took out my Hebrew alphabet, because Hebrew letters are not something that I grew up understanding. It's not part of my cultural experience. So it's a different language to me, literally, right? So when in an effort to understand what I was looking at, I printed out a source that gave me the Hebrew letters and, their name. And then I found another source that gave me what the name meant and put it all together and figured out, that way I learned that, the Fool was given the 21st letter. So that would suggest to me that they placed the Fool in, this sequence here, right? Because that letter, I guess, possessed the qualities that this deck creator decided was associated with the Fool. Now, on the Picard, we have a very relatable bachelor who looks very familiar, as the magicians tend to look. We're accustomed to seeing this style in TDM cards. But in this deck, the number 1 and number 2 cards, which are, the magician and the female pope or the high priestess, have become instead like significator cards for male and female. So for the female pope, even though all 3 decks are expressed a bit differently, I think we could probably all, well, with the exception of this, which is the female consultant, we would be able to recognize and understand that these were both the female pope. Expressed a little differently, this female pope has a veil over her eyes and a veil behind her, but she has the keys that are associated with the female pope in some decks. She also has the book, which is also here. And she clearly has the triple-tiered crown, the moon association, and the moon association on this card as well. So we see the moon on both of those cards. And is moon on the female consultant card? I don't see it. I suppose that might be the moon. Okay, now we're getting to where the cards are kind of normal, where we might be able to recognize this as the Empress. Plus, we have the addition of the number 3. Now, in the Knapp man, the Knapp Hall deck. I imagine that's the same letter, just, just how like letters are sometimes written in a different style, which is why it's difficult for someone like myself who, I wouldn't readily recognize those as the same letters because I just don't know the alphabet. And here we have an astrological association. With the Emperor, we have, I believe that's a symbol for the sun. We have the fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which, let's see if it jibes with this one. I don't know. I guess they're similar enough that they would be the same letter. I mean, the fourth letter is the fourth letter, so I guess it's just a stylistic, just stylistically different. And let's see, the association here is the sun on this card. And on this card, I'm not familiar with that sign of the zodiac. I'm not an astrologist, I'm not real familiar with signs of the zodiac, So I can only go by, the basic, I have a chart for myself to remind myself of the signs of the zodiac when I see them, and then also the planetary symbols, because it helps me too when I see them on cards. Like, for example, when I see Mercury, right? When I see this symbol here, and I see it's associated with, the Pope, and I can cross-reference, I see it's Mercury, then I know for whatever reasons astrologers associate the Pope with Mercury. And so then it can prompt me to go check out Mercury. But as I think I mentioned earlier in the video, these additional symbols can enhance your understanding of the image of the card if you're not familiar with the historic representation. I mean, this, image of a male pope with individuals before him, in this case there's three, and there is a precedence for three in some tarot decks. Typically it's two. If you know the significance, the origin story of this card, maybe you don't need the additional like attributes of letters or, astrological symbols or planetary symbols, right? Maybe you don't need that. And it's interesting here. Yep, they're the same, because the fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the same. It's the same. So if it helps you to know, if you don't know about tarot, but you know what these letters mean, then that might, be the gateway to understanding the card, I think, though, if you know the origin story of the imagery, then these additional symbols aren't necessary. They don't add anything for me except that I'm interested, and I will, cross-reference, and I'll see what the Hebrew letter means, or I'll see what the astrological or planetary symbol means. And then I'll see, oh, okay, I guess, there's a connection, or there's a vague connection between, the origin story of the card and these symbols. So it can enhance your understanding in general. But if you already understand what the card means, don't worry if you don't understand what the symbols mean. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So we have the 6th letter, which is stylistically, now where, stylistically, you know, a little different between the whole deck, rather, excuse me, and El Gran Tarot Esoterico. Let's see, we have, I'm going to say Aries. Is this Aries? But or is it oh, it's probably Taurus, because it's got horns that are like that. So those are, it's interesting. And this one looks like, so this, okay, so this is an association with Taurus. And this, I don't know what that is. It's not quite Scorpio. So they have different associations. Wow. They have different astrological associations, which can be confusing. Because, you know, Taurus, I would think, would be quite different than, you know, than Scorpio. Oh, no, this is Virgo. This is Virgo. So we have Taurus and Virgo describing the same card. So there must not be a consistent or unifying agreement on how astrological signs are designated for the cards, which is interesting. It just makes it more confusing as far as I'm concerned. Here we have an association, it looks like, with Gemini, and here we have an association with Sagittarius. So again, quite different. Of course, the Hebrew letter will be the same because it's the 7th letter. Now, does Worth put... No, Worth does not seem to put astrological signs on the cards. It's more just the letters. So, what is that? Is that Libra? Oh, yeah, it must be because there's scales. Oh, but then look at this, and this is Cancer, right? Wow. And here we have the depiction from what I remember from being a kid, you know, going to catechism, is the wisdom of Solomon, right? The wisdom of King Solomon, and the story about 2 mothers who are arguing that the baby belongs to them, and King Solomon says, well, we'll split the baby in half. And the real mother, the biological mother of the child, or the one who really is the genuine mother of the child, insists that just give it to the other mother to spare the child's life. And then he understood that that was the sincere or genuine mother, not necessarily the biological mother, I guess, but the woman who was meant to be the child's mother, which is a good card for justice, you know, the wisdom of Solomon. But I think it's interesting that we have different astrological assignations for the same card. But you would think that Libra, since it's got scales, would have been a more accurate. But I do appreciate that all 3 of these decks have Justice as the number 8 card. Okay, we see reference to some of the older Italian decks that have the stag in association with the hermit, the stag being a symbol for passage of time. Both have the lantern. What is this? This is a symbol of what? This is a planetary symbol, and I'm not sure I know what that is. I don't see it on my little chart. It looks like Neptune thing. Oh, it must be. Okay, it's Neptune, okay. Because I was thinking it looks like something that would have been like in Neptune's hand under the sea. So here we have Neptune, and here we have Leo. Leo. Wow. So I think when you see astrological symbols, you can take them with a grain of salt, because I guess it depends on the individual who created the deck and how they associate the cards. So that could be very confusing, because I would just disregard it, to tell you the truth. Now life gets interesting when we get to the number 10 card of El Gran Tarot Esoterico. At first I thought this was Janus, but I don't know. I believe that's Virgo. Assignation, the 10th letter of the alphabet. We have a monkey in a tree with a pinwheel and a polar bear. And here we have an image we're more accustomed to associate with TDM style decks. I'm not sure what the L means. I think I knew for a split second, and I've already forgotten it. I think I'll just put this deck aside, because the only similarity it really seems to have until we get to the pips are the Hebrew letters. So this is Fortitude. An association here with Venus. I don't know what that is. Could that be Capricorn? Looks like a cross between Leo and Capricorn. I don't know. So here we have Libra. I don't know what that is. Oh, that could be Uranus. Yeah, that's Uranus. So that's an association with a planet, not the sign of the zodiac. I don't see any astrological associations with this card. But here we have an association with Saturn. Yeah, Saturn. I remember learning about Saturn and death. I kind of feel like it's probably on the card, but I'm just not seeing it. Okay, so we have Scorpio for temperance on this card, and Aquarius. Wow. We have some interesting little symbols here. Quite a lot going on here. So this appears to be Sagittarius, and here the association is, what is that? The male symbol? Mars? Aries? Mars? So I think this is Aries, right? And I don't see a planetary or astrological symbol on this card. Again, I'm looking at it through the camera lens, so it's a little hard to see everything. Okay. Boy, there's a lot of energy in this one, right? This is, again, Mercury. This one is Venus. It's kind of like a comet kind of energy combined with, you know, Aquarius, which is the constellation that this is depicting, which is kind of strange. It wouldn't be associated. I don't know. There's no astrological image with either of these cards. It's just planetary. All right. Okay, here we have the association with Cancer. And here we have it with Aquarius. That's so weird. I forget what that symbol is called, the three symbols, you know, this three spirals, Triskelight or something like that. And we have an association with the moon. We have the moon here. And what do we have here? Maybe Gemini. I'm looking at the symbols rather than the card, but yeah, it would be Gemini. So that's very interesting. Okay, so for the Judgment card, they call it El Ciclo, like the cycle. And it's the number 20 card, so like 10, when you get to 20, you start a new generation. I suppose that's what they're referencing. This looks like Pisces, and here we have also Pisces. So this is the only card in the trumps so far that are in agreement with each other that I can recall. And I guess, you know, the regeneration of the number 20, you know, kind of makes sense because this card, roughly, could be seen as starting your new transitional life. And the final card. So here it looks like we have Taurus, and here it looks like we have, what is that? Just bear with me, folks. Jupiter. What does Jupiter suggest? And we have a sun and a moon. Okay, so now I believe is when we get to the very similar pips. And it's with the pips that I am to understand that Altero Esoterico, when the creator created the pips for this deck, they had only the benefit of written documentation of Picard's deck. So we only had the written description of what each of the pips should look like. When this deck was republished, by then a copy of the actual deck had surfaced, and so they had the benefit of the originals from which to reproduce the deck with greatest accuracy. And I want to pull, this is where I'll pull the manly the Knapp Man cards to see how similar are they. Okay, not at all. So there goes that theory. And I don't quite understand. There's a lot of symbols on the Knapp Hall deck that I don't quite grasp. Okay, here we go. We'll put this aside. Sorry about that. Beautiful image on both cards, really beautiful. So then it appears then maybe in the written description there was no mention perhaps of the moon, the crescent moon, which is interesting. Now look at that, the lightning striking swords and water. And the other point, of course, is to mention that the suit of swords is associated with water and the suit of cups is associated with air, which would, and you can't forget it with these decks because water is everywhere on the swords and symbols for air is everywhere on the cups. Now here, they must have had a triangular shape created by 3 swords, piercing a fish, but maybe they didn't, the description didn't designate whether it was above or below, where the point was pointing, right? So that's interesting. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 moons. 2, 4, 6, 8. There's 8, 9, 10 moons. Interesting. How the information was perceived. Here it's spot on. Well, except that the original is underwater in large part. So there's interesting that the sun is in the water and the moon is dominating in the sky. That's interesting. Very. 3 above the water and 4 below. Whenever we see 7, it's like 3 above and 4 below. 4 being a foundational number, I suppose. Very, very, very similar in execution. Two fish in the water with 4 swords, and above lily pads. Embellishing the 5 swords. Now, either deck, they're beautiful. We have the checkered floor, like strategists. He looks like he's searching on the water's edge. Now this one is peculiar. There's no water in the night. And here the knight is going through water and has a crustacean above him. Maybe this card got lost and maybe the description for that card was missing or something, because it couldn't be further from the mark. I'm guessing that's supposed to be the symbol for Cancer, which appears here. Both of the queens are on the moon, a crescent moon. As are the kings. Now this kind of gives me a little bit of a Piedmontese flair with the butterfly. On the Vernano, the butterfly appears in the Fool card. It was the first time a butterfly ever appeared in a tarot deck. And it kind of kind of reminds me of the Ace as well, of the Piedmontese deck. I don't know why, it just is kind of reminding me of it. So here we have a basket and here we have a castle. So maybe something got lost in translation. Maybe there was a word that was similar or could be misunderstood in the original text. Here we have like two, what are those, birds? Kind of beaked animals with a butterfly in the middle. We don't see any of that here. We see symbols for Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. Here we have Libra. There it is. So the butterfly, I think, represents in these decks to remind us that it's air. So we have Venus here, so kind of an association with love, a wreath, a moon and a sun. So they're not exactly always the same. So maybe either the description was lacking in detail, or this artist just decided to deviate to some degree. Now, me personally, when I see butterflies, it kind of makes me, I associate it with the death of my mother, because it was just like so uncanny. After my mother died, like we were seeing butterflies like that day everywhere, And now whenever I see a butterfly, I think of my mom. Right, she's called to mind. So I think, like, for me, the butterfly is kind of like more spiritual, even though this is supposed to be associated with air and the butterfly is supposed to be associated with air. There's still a soulful connection to, the way I think of cups as being spirit, or soul. Now this looks like we have like an egg yolk or a sun inside of an egg. 2 cups. So it's kind of interesting, that it would be air, but also can call to mind, like, a certain spirituality. So here we had an egg, right? And then here we have like a bird cracking out of the egg. But here we have the bird cracking the egg. So it's quite different. They both, they both associate with Gemini, which is interesting. So here we have doves and an owl. And here's the butterfly. I imagine maybe the butterfly is here as well. Oh, there they are. Oh. Hmm. So pretty. So I don't think it's too hard to wrap your head around the elemental switch with cups and swords. I don't know that you could just say the Nine of Cups is equal to the Nine of Swords, because it's not the same feel, right? It's not the same feeling. So instead of maybe the Nine of Swords that I might associate with an escalated level of aggression or assertion, or maybe sometimes pain, that's not the message here, so I wouldn't go in that direction. Instead, I would be Nine of Air, maybe being, more lofty ideals. So it would take me in a different direction. So I don't think I would, I don't think one could superimpose the Nine of Swords or the Nine of, Cups for the Nine of Swords, because the imagery doesn't lend itself to that, right? Which is kind of interesting. So it kind of, to read with these cards, you have to restructure your brain. You have to rewire your brain, to reconsider how you might interpret, the switch, because you couldn't really just superimpose your understanding. I hope I said that clear. And for many of us, the suit of batons is fire, so that's the same. Elemental association. But again, the images evoke something different, and the symbols evoke something different. So they kind of are scenic pips. So they have wheat for growth, a kind of feline creature. So here we have the elements, the symbols for the elements, and here the symbols for the elements, I guess, are expressed through the animals. I love the sun rising or setting. So do you have a preference? I think they're both really beautiful. I think now going through this like I have, and taking the time to get the Hebrew letters out and to get the chart out for the planetary associations and the astrological associations, I feel I can just disregard those, and go on and base my interpretation on the image itself. You know, like I don't need the clues, you know. So maybe, you know, maybe this video has been helpful to you as well in that regard. Both she's standing on an arrow or riding on an arrow almost in this one. Oh, excuse me. I'm about to sneeze. Oh, excuse me. Oh, my bad. And the last suit. Now, I think the suit of coins is my favorite. Just so pretty. You know, growth. Planting and growing. So, you know, I start out the video with three or four decks, and then I end up just focusing on two. And sometimes that's how videos go. You know, my videos aren't scripted. I don't know necessarily where I'm going. I just go. And sometimes if decks remind me of one another, you know, I'll compare them. You know, also the Crystal Tarot, for those of you who have the Crystal Tarot, also has like a basis or an association with the Picard deck. And that's the last two cards here. The King of Coin. That symbol must be, what is that? Is that Capricorn? Huh. I don't know what that is. Because here's the association with Capricorn. But these two decks don't necessarily, but they would be, well, I think in the description, if it said Capricorn, that's where he would have gotten Capricorn. So maybe that's the Capricorn sign. For money, okay. Maybe. I don't know enough about astrology to know if that's true or not, so I'm just making a guess. So I hope you have enjoyed this video and that it gave you some comfort in feeling as though you can, you know, disregard the symbols, the additional symbols to the images. If you're familiar with the origin stories, right, then, you know, the symbols are, you know, whether they're letters or planetary symbols or astrological symbols, are just in addition to an understanding of the card. As far as the pips go, I think you'd have to probably treat these pips differently because they do have a different delivery than what we're accustomed to seeing in TDM and the Italian decks and the Swiss decks. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well.